So a lot of the information that we gathered, we printed out on our Muck Notes. I told you this before.
Yeah.
This is Ken Stone and I. Ken Stone was a vegetable specialist out in Orleans County, where Christie works now.
Yep.
And Ken Stone and I did this Muck Notes, and Muck Notes were, everybody read them. Like I said, they went to Alaska. On my mailing list, I had people in Alaska, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Oregon, Florida.
Yeah.
They were read all over the place. So that's how we disseminated all this information, whether it was about fertility or for equipment or for chemistry. That we all did this.
Was that part of the Cornell, the cooperative extension, or?
That was Cornell Cooperative Extension.
Which still to this day, with Christy Hopkins' work and Ryan Null, is still cutting edge, and other parts, states and counties look up to that.
Absolutely.
Their knowledge and what they do.
Research-based information coming out to the growers. The difference from when I started, when we were using these Muck Notes for the franking privilege that were mailed out and hoped that somebody would read them. Now all the information comes to you email.
Yep.
Instantaneously.
Through the Veg Edge, we're part of the Veg Edge. We're part of the vegetable growers with Christy Hoping, and
So that's a change in the technology and getting the information disseminated out to the growers. Meetings, we used to have grower meetings. Every June was the muck meeting. We still have that here now, but we used to do a lot of grower meetings. And Christy still holds some grower meetings.
Yeah.
But we always had grower meetings in the wintertime. Just about every month we'd sit down with the grower someplace and have a dinner and have a grower meeting.
Yeah.
But we don't do that quite as much anymore now as what we used to. But the information is still disseminated to the growers. And I think that face-to-face with Christy or the researchers out of Geneva or Cornell, Ithaca, it's very important to have that conversation with them direct in front of you.
Yeah.
You get to see what they're talking about, ask them questions that pertain to your particular situation.
Right.
It's good.
Yeah, it is. It's very good network, and we probably don't do enough of it. We still have the Oswego County Vegetable Growers Association, and we probably should do a better job. I mean, there's technology that cuts back on the need for some of that, but when you get a few beers in you at the bar and you start talking to your fellow growers, you're like, holy, I saw the same thing. You figure shit out.
Yeah.
You just...
Well, that's the other thing, and that's why I always like to have these night meetings, or what I call these night meetings, these grower meetings, to get the growers together, because you get that opportunity to exchange ideas. This is what I saw happen on my farm when I did this.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah? Geez, I ought to try that.
Yeah.
But
sure. You know how many times I'm talking with the Jacobsons or the DeSavos or anybody.
You learn something from your neighbor.
You really do.
Absolutely.
It's definitely very critical.
So we got the onions being planted now with a precision seeders. So we were using the stand hay for quite a long time. And the stand hay had some issues. Now you've gone to the Nybex. Isn't it the Nybex you're using now?
The monosem. Yeah.
And I think
vacuum planner.
The vacuum planners, I think it's more precision than even what we were with the stand hay.
Mm-hmm.
So the precision seeding has continued to, I guess, improve.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually have cut down the amount of seed that we're using per acre. When I came here, if you weren't planting at least 3 to 4 pounds of seed, raw seed per acre, you didn't have enough seed in.
Well, in the
I couldn't believe it. I looked at about 100,000 seeds in a pound of onions, give or take, 5,000 here or there. That's a lot of seed. Where did it all go? Well, you got the maggot, you got the cutworm. You had, that time it was Randox and chloral, you had burn off, and if you got a frost, when you just put your Randox on, you lost 50% of your crop. So they wanted to make sure they had a big stand.
Yeah.
At that time, the grading system was 1 5/8". That was your bottom.
For the onion market, yeah.
1 5/8". So your onion market has changed. They're demanding a larger size bulb.
Right. Our minimum's
The
now
minimum
2 1/4,
2
and
1/4.
you hear stupid rumblings of, can you do 2 1/2? Is the next
Yeah.
going to be the next?
Well,
push.
it went from 1 5/8", it went to 2 inches at bottom.
Yeah.
2 to 2 7/8". Now you're going from 2 1/2 to 2 7/8". Now they want near. So the more uniform that bulb is in that package, the better it looks
Right.
for the consumer.
Right.
It's all eyeball appeal.
Right.
When we were packing back in the 70s, you had 1 5/8", and you had 2 7/8 in the package.
Right.
Everything over
Which
2
people don't mind because you don't need a big onion every time. But
No.
what's
But-
the chain store care if you cut open a onion, use half of it, throw the other half away, come back and
Yep.
buy more?
But the market has changed, and you've had to adjust with that. I remember the first time I tried some different seeding populations was at DeSalvo Farms, and I used my hand planter, of course. And at that time, it was actually on a cone seeder on a Planet Junior hand frame. It had my own drench system set up on it, so I could do my little trial work. But I did do 4 different seed populations per acre. And the outcome of that was I got the same tonnage. The difference was the size of the bulbs. 1 acre of ground can produce so much dry matter. And it depends on the limiting factor, and normally the limiting factor is water.
Right.
You always have enough fertilizer.
Right.
So fertilizer is not the limiting factor. Most of the time, it's water. It's either too much or not enough.
Right.
And I'd rather see a dry year than I would a wet year.
How's the saying go?
A dry year will scare you to death, a wet year will starve you to death. Okay? But that's a fact. I don't know where these onions get their water, but I've seen some very, very dry years, and we've always managed to get a crop.
Yeah.
The tonnage may not have been as big, but we've always managed to get a crop in a dry year. In a wet year, you may not get them.
17 was probably the last dry year we had.
Yeah.
Dry
Yeah.
throughout, and we did have a crop in spots, but
Yeah.
it depended on the muck that it was planted on.
Yeah.
But
So another change in the equipment on there, when I first came here, like I said, they were planting with Planet Juniors, and the row spacing was 15 inches apart. But when you pulled the onions, they had 2 rotating discs. I think they were called Brunner pullers, but those discs would rotate. And they had a drag wheel, and the disc would rotate. It was a gear system. And if the disc was set too deep, they would hill a lot of dirt up in with the onions. If the disc were set just a little bit too shallow, they'd cut the onion bulb. Oh, that didn't look good to me at all. So, as I say, I knew about as much about growing onions as I did about growing lettuce at that time when I came here. But I looked at that and I said, that's not good. There's a better way.
yeah.
And I talked to some of the growers, and I said, well, somebody one time had tried just a bar, just to run under it and uncut it, and that wasn't good either. It didn't work as well. In the West, they use a rotating bar. That's the one you're using today.
Yeah.
It was approximately 2 inches square, steel stock. Unfortunately, the one I brought over here to trial was like 12 rows wide. Everybody's planting with 6 rows or 8 rows, so it was way, way too wide.
Yeah.
Back to Kenny Sheldon. Took it over, had it dropped off at Kenny Sheldon's. And I said, Kenny, this is what we want to do. I want to try this, but I don't know how. I mean, it's not set up for our row spacing. We need something set up for our row spacing. And I guess we did try it the way it was, and Kenny said, yeah, that'll work. And then John Kohler from Canastota came up and picked it up, and he took it down to his place, and he pulled a few acres with it.
Yeah.
Yep, that'll work. Well, the next year, Kenny Sheldon had them set up. There's only one little problem. They were mounted underneath a G tractor.
Yeah.
And he had a Briggs Stratton engine sitting right off, I forget whether the left side or the right side. And you had to wear earmuffs because it was so noisy. So the Briggs Stratton engine was actually driving this bar. He didn't have it set up. He just wanted something to try.
Yeah.
But we pulled a lot of onions with that.
He must have made a lot of them that year.
He made a lot of them that year.
Yeah.
So God bless Kenny Sheldon. I spent a lot of time with Kenny. He and I didn't always see eye to eye, but we always managed to get some ideas out.
Well,
I learned a lot from him.
You managed to implement stuff that's still going strong
today.
Still going
strong today. Yep. You do it. So when Kenny left us, God bless him, we lost somebody that would really put stuff together. Now you got your own shop,
Yeah.
Most of the growers have developed their own shop. I know the DeSalvo's got their own shop. They built their own mule train, and Zappello's put a shop together. They even built their own harvester at one time.
Yeah.
And now a lot of people are relying on Shipnick for his harvesting.
Yeah.
And speaking of harvesting, that was another big change that came about. Once we got the onions pulled, we're still using the airflow harvester, which is a tow behind.
Yeah.
Good machine, did a good job, put them in the boxes, and from then we had to handle the boxes off, so okay. But Shipnick came up with a self-propel, and I think that was a big labor saving one too. From the self-propel, you couldn't go directly to boxes, but a lot of the onion growers at that time were converting over to bulk storage, which bulk storage works very well. You have to put the air system in it to blow the air up through the onions to dry them out properly and maintain them through the winter. But they do shrink some in that bulk storage because you're putting a lot of air through them. And then some people like you build a system to convert back the boxes. Once you harvest them into V-bodies, you put them back in the boxes so you can put them in your storage here. You don't get as much shrink in a box storage as you do in a bulk storage, but it's whatever works for your system.
Yeah.
But that was a good move to go to these bulk harvesters. So that was another big change in the onion industry.
I mean, when you harvest them in the field, they gotta stay there to cure. So you can't get any work done in the field. You can't cover crop.
Right.
Like that was probably one of the downfalls.
And you're at risk
to the weather.
To the weather.
Yeah.
So we were stacking these boxes. I remember seeing Mike Filito and a couple other growers stacking them 4 high. Canastota used to stack them 4 high. When we got heavy rains one fall, and some of these boxes started to settle, lean a little bit, they started falling over.
Yeah.
You got problems. If you get wet fields, you've got one track to get into that box to pick it up and get it out of the field. If you miss that first time, you got a hell of a job trying to get that fork into that pallet box to pick it up.
Yeah.
So I mean, it just makes sense to get these onions off the field.
And the dirt that you'd bring in with you, and the compaction and traffic in the field. I mean, even to back it up before the air flows, it was all hand shears and bushel crates. Right, I was never a part of that, but
I top 100, 125 bushel a day. That's how I could top onions.
With a set of shears.
With a set of sheep shears and a bucket.
Wow, how much a bushel would you get paid? Was it piecework or hourly?
I was working by the hour. Just like picking up potatoes when I was a kid. Picking up potatoes, I always worked by the hour. 75 cents an hour until I was making big money. Anyway, but I'd pick up 100 bushel a day, but I always got the job of hauling them in too. I had to haul. In the morning I had to go draw boxes and drop boxes. while we were digging, I'd be dropping boxes until the crew got there. And then at noon, I'd haul a couple loads up.
Yeah.
And then at night, everybody go home, I'd be hauling onions in. Or hauling potatoes in and stack them in the storage. All in crates.
So, average yield when you were hand topping onions, how many bushel an acre were you getting? What was a decent yield?
It really depended upon the growing season.
Yeah.
As I said, it was a hedgerow planting. I've seen onions at harvest time that would be probably 6 inches wide. The rows would be 6 inches wide, and they would be crowned up. The onion on top would have roots right down into the soil. That was on a good growing year. And you were getting 1,000 to 1,200 bushel.
Wow.
But everything was perfect.
Yeah.
Other years, I'd say the average at that time was somewhere around 700 or 800 bushel. But you remember, that was rotated with lettuce.
Right.
That made a big difference.
Right.
Rotation with that lettuce made a big difference because it cut the life cycle of the onion maggot and all the other little goodies that happened with those onions.
Yeah. And that green manure going back into the soil from a lettuce crop helped with nematode, right?
No.
No?
Lettuce promoted nematode.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Lettuce promoted nematode. Lettuce was notorious for nematode.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how'd you battle that?
Fumigation.
Fumigation.
With lettuce crop, I did a lot of trials with that too. We had fumigation trials. But one of the trials I had, along with the fumigation chemicals, I used a rototiller. After the first crop of lettuce was harvested, because a lot of this lettuce was double cropped.
Yeah.
2 crops a year. I rototilled a plot, and of course all these plots were replicated, but I had a rototiller. And what we found out was, if you take your first crop of lettuce off in the July, early August, and you leave that ground fallow and you till it, you dry that ground out, you desiccate the nematode population.
Oh.
We had as good of control of nematodes by leaving the ground fallow and keeping it tilled as we did using the injected chemical for the nematode control.
Huh. Was there another crop to go behind lettuce that would help with the nematode issue? Or was it just keeping it fallow was just...
Keeping it fallow would be the best thing to do. But see, lettuce was harvested up until September 15th to 20th.
Yeah.
But you couldn't do that with your late planted lettuce. But double cropping lettuce, you take a crop off on early July, and you put a second crop in, you just multiply. You just absolutely explode that nematode population.
Wow.
Sam Bonacorsi one day, and I said, Sam, you really shouldn't do this because you're going to have nematodes. He says, I'll show you how to grow a crop with nematodes. He's side dressing with nitrate about every week just to keep pushing that plant.
Yeah.
But the nematodes they were like grapes hanging on those roots. It was awful.
So, in the 80s, clearing muck was coming to an end.
In the 80s, clearing muck had ceased.
Yeah.
It was the Freshwater Wetlands Act. I think that was what they called it. And that was 1972. That was gave the Army Corps of Engineers the control up to the source of the water for all wetlands. So I mean, even your muck ditches.
Yeah.
That was in 1972. But we were still clearing then. But it was in 1985 when they had the Swamp Buster, Side Buster bill that was passed. And once that was passed, that forbid any clearing of any muck whatsoever.
So
that stopped it.
You were a big part of surveying muck lands and getting the right paperwork and getting the mucks cleared, right?
We had a lot of conversations with Army Corps and DEC through the late 70s and early 80s. Yes. I remember one time we had a young girl from New York City with Army Corps. We were out at the Salvos. They wanted to clear that 50-acre piece of new muck. I guess they call that the B muck. I guess it is. Anyway.
I'm gonna have to edit that out.
Okay. Well, anyway, and we had New York State DEC there, and we were doing a lot of paperwork. Well, they would say, okay, we will let you clear this if you form another wetland. So that was a trade-off. You had to form another 50-acre wetland in order to clear this particular swamp to make a farmland out of it. And so actually the Salvos did that. They bought a piece of ground down on Route 49, almost to Central Square, not quite, but it was
on that S curve.
On that S curve.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we worked with some people from the college at Cornell. Can't remember the professor's name. But anyway, the Salvos had to go in there with their backhoe and they had to make islands.
For?
Well, they had to have a place for the wetland crops to grow.
Oh.
And they had a place for the muskrats to live, okay?
Oh,
I don't know. But
gotcha.
you couldn't just leave it a flat piece of pond in there. We had to create
a habitat.
Yeah. Right. Create habitat. So the Salvos did that. They went in and they make mounds out of there and all this good stuff. The people from Cornell, the professor and his graduate students went up there with a lot of plants, and they planted a lot of woody type wetland plants on those islands to get that to grow and form an actual wetland and help create one.
Yeah.
Went back the next spring and there was no plants there. They were eating right to the ground. Muskrats had eaten them all. So that stopped that deal anyway. But yeah, that was a deal with Army Corps and with DEC at that time. We had to trade off. If you wanted to clear ground, you had to go create another wetland.
Yeah.
The other thing this was before 1985, before the Swamp Buster bill. There were some pieces here that didn't quite meet the criteria of a wetland. A wetland had to have a muckland soil, had to be hydraulic soil, which, no question, muck is a hydraulic soil. It had to have wetland vegetation, and most of the farms around here had a wetland vegetation on them, either sedges or reeds, or they had the climax timber on them at that time. And but you had to have a 16-inch water table. The water table had to be at least 16 inches below the surface of the ground, so you did not impact the root zone of the plants that were growing there, the trees that were growing there. So we went out and actually probed 4 different pockets, I think. And I took a Morrow ice auger, bored holes, what they use for ice fishing. Yeah. So I bored holes 2 feet deep down in this muck. Wonder I didn't get thrown in jail for disturbing wetland. But anyway, bored these holes, put a 1 square foot piece of plywood over top these holes so they wouldn't silt in. Put a flag up so you find them, or tie a ribbon to the tree or something. And 3 weeks later, we went back with the Army Corps and the DEC people, and we measured the water table. And they let us clear. They gave us approval to finish clearing 3 of the 4, because the water table was deeper than 16 inches. It was not impacting. One of them was right over there on that farm that you're working now, by Mianos on the north end. You bought it from Bland. Mm-hmm. And that was that piece of muck that Jimmy still owned at that time. Jimmy Salvos still owned at that time. Went back in there. That was the one that did not get approved because the water table is still higher than 16 inches.
Oh. Yeah, it's pretty wet in those woods.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the most part, that muck is converted because it's attached to a working farm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a way has been changed.
It has been.
So we should just go clear it down.
You know, I don't think so. I'll send you a postcard. Okay. John Kohler was running the farm, beets all farm over in Palermo, and he was interested in the farm that Moranos had at that time. It was the woods, actually, it was a swamp on the north end of the Oswego farm. That was all woods at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked that entire farm with a muck probe, and I had a muck probe that had 10 4-foot rods on it to go 40 foot. I only took 2 rods with me because I didn't want to go that deep. It was too hard to carry in the woods. So I had those 2 rods. I walked that and I probed all that, and that is deep muck.
So you went 40 feet down?
Only one time. Only one time did I ever put all 4 rods on, and that was on a piece of ground. Again, it was at Savills. And when I walked out onto this piece, it was like walking on sponges, man. I was concerned that I should have had my snowshoes on. I was afraid I was going through it. This was a pristine piece of ground. I think it was the heart of the melon that his dad never got to clear. But I started putting rod on there and shoving it down. Well, see, 4 feet of rod, and on the bottom of that, I had a point that would go through the ground, but I could extract that point out, and it would be a hollow tube 1 foot long, and I could take a core sample of what was down there. So I was putting these rods on, and Jesus, they were just falling. I had a pair of vice grips with me, and I would put the vice grips on it so the rod wouldn't fall around through the muck, and screw another rod on, let it down another 40. I put 40 foot down there.
Wow.
Well, the Salvos did actually clear that, and now they have a piece of muck there, and it's still pretty impressive to see it. The muck actually runs down into this hollow and comes back up the other side. That whole muck, you pull the water out of it, it all went down.
Huh.
It just settled right down. It was a floating bog that we actually pulled the water out from under. But that's the only place I put my 40-foot rod on.
I mean, and the average, you think 10?
On the average, somewhere around 10 to 12 feet. On the average, 10 to 12 feet.
Still a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
other counties, they only started with
Yeah.
a foot or 2.
Yeah.
Whatever they're up to now, down to now isn't much, but.
But when I was probing mucks at that time, I would tell a guy, if you didn't have at least 4 foot, if not 6 feet of muck, I wouldn't even bother with it. Because the time it settled, within 20, 30 years, it's going to be down to the point where you're going to be too shallow to really farm.
We're there in some spots.
I know you're there in some spots now. Yeah.
I mean, Oswego County is just so different than other counties where they have one big area. We have 26 acre pockets, 100
Right.
acre, 50.
No.
It's just, and there's not a straight edge on one of them.
No.
It's
Well, this muck was formed back in the glacier time. It's 10, 11,000 years ago when the glacier came down through here. It gouged out these muck pockets. You go over to Wayne County, you got the same thing. You got muck pockets over there, but they're in between the drumlins, where you got these high sloping hills. We call them the drumlins. That's in Wayne County. You see a couple of them over in Eastwood County, but mostly in Wayne. But over here, you don't see the drumlins, but you got the same effect. The gouging out of when the ice came down through here with the glacier, and when it receded, it left the water impounded in these hollow spots, and they gradually filled in with the vegetation. So it would take somewhere around, they tell me, 400 years to create 1 inch of muck.
Wow.
Wow.
So you're talking something 40 feet down, so that's, I can't do the math, but,
No, but
that would be
that was mostly water, because it was a floating bog.
Yeah.
It was a floating bog. But in this book of the Earth that Jim wrote, that Ike the Hollander was talking about. I guess John the Hollander was telling about his father, Ike, owned the Oswego Gardens at that time. When they were clearing that was back in the 30s and 40s. They had put a 70-foot pole down through the muck.
Wow.
And Ike was talking about, even when I was talking with him, Ike was still here. He was telling about when they cleared the muck, And even today, when he was farming it, they'd hit something with their drags or with their chisel plowing or something like that, and they'd have to dig up a big tree. And he actually took some of these trees that they dug up to the sawmill and sawed them up.
Yeah, we still hit wood. I mean,
Yeah.
it's still a part of the muck.
Well, the wood is a climax vegetation on these mucks. It started out with the aquatic vegetation. Then as it built up, then you got the sedge and reeds because they would stand more water and they were floating on bogs. But eventually you got so the tree species would stand there. So that's where we got a climax vegetation as trees on most of our mucks here.
So you helped my father at our South Hannibal farm clear that one side. And he said you came out with the probe one day and there was a ditch with a log. So he said he walked across the log.
Yep.
And
I didn't make it.
you walked across and then you went in the water.
I was carrying my muck probe and I slipped off that damn log and I went in the ditch.
And he said Dale hit the water, got up, looked at me and pointed at me and said, "Don't you tell a damn soul about this."
Well, I'll tell you what happened the rest of the day. I went home and changed my clothes, put my hunting pants on, and went and sat in my tree stand and shot a deer that afternoon.
Oh, nice. That's a good day.
That was a good day. Yep.
That's funny. Yeah, we still run that farm today. I mean, all this up to 1985, and we've lost farms. You know, we're working with just what we have.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and you can grow onions on mineral soil. It has to be the right type.
Absolutely.
But it's not as efficient as
No.
a muck.
This is one of the early muck notes. This was done in March of 1972. These are onions that were grown on the Long Island on mineral soil.
It's a sandier.
It's a sandy loam.
Sandy loam.
Sandy loam, flatter, and then
Wow.
yeah. And I put that on the muck notes at that time just to show that we could grow onions on mineral soil. Some of the onions are being grown on mineral soil in western New York now.
Yeah.
Especially transplants.
I mean, your yields go down by a third at least, wouldn't you say?
Depends on the growing season.
Right. I mean, growing season to growing season, apples to apples.
But direct seeding onions on mineral soil is going to be tougher to get a yield on them. Transplants, you've got a big root system starting out already, and the plant can survive and produces much better.
Yeah.
Grows much better.
I mean, we do grow onions on upland. You've seen some of our farms.
Yep.
The edges, it's like a bowl.
Right.
It feathers
Right.
out to no muck, and we still plant some of those edges, and we do get decent crops.
Yep.
Depends on the year.
The size of your farms now, you're able to do this crop rotation. We're back in the 70s when I came here. There was 85 growers here in the area. They were always working every square foot of ground that they could possibly work.
Right.
They had to make a living off this farm.
Right.
Now you've got enough acreage that you can rotate some ground.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to plant so many acres of onions for your market. You can market so many onions through the winter period.
Right.
So you grow your 300 or 350 whatever acres you're going to grow, but the rest of the ground you can rotate.
Right. I mean,
just about everybody's doing the same thing now. Jacobson's doing that. Nicky's doing that. So
from back-to-back onions, where we were at probably in the early 2000s, and then ground started becoming more available because some farmers were, losing farms or selling out or whatever.
Yep.
I bet you there's at least a 25% increase in yield on rotated ground.
Well, when we were rotating with lettuce, as I say, our onions yields were 1,000, 1,200 bags the acre, again, depending on the growing season. But once we went away from that lettuce crop, some of the growers went away earlier than others, so they were growing onions after onions after onions after onions. You get out there to the third, fourth, fifth, sixth year of onions on top of onions, your yields were going down, so we're lucky to get 700, 800 bags a year. Sometimes only 6.
Yep. I've seen it firsthand, and makes a huge.
It's a huge difference. The rotation is the key.
Yeah, you've always preached that, Dale. You've always been in our ear about it, we know that we should have been doing it sooner. But like you said, there was so many farmers in the area. It was, dog eat dog. I mean, it still is in a way because onions are a global market. Mexico, Absolutely. Canada, even onions coming from Holland and exports to Asia and all that. But in our area, in our nucleus, we are able to do that now. Before, I don't think we really had the ability to do it.
You didn't have the ability to do that. And there were, like I say, there were more growers. There was smaller acreage. But the guy that really brought the onion market up in this area was Danny Dunsmore. He was a lot more open with his information, shall we say.
Yes.
What he found out was going on across the onion industry, he would kind of report back to his other growers. He was the president of the Oswego County Vegetable Growers.
Yeah.
And I know he talked to everybody here. He graded onions for just about everybody here. He bought onions here.
Yep.
So that brought a lot of stability to the onion market here.
Right. Danny was you're the first influencer of our county. Danny was the second, and we grew up with Big Dog being our go-to guy.
He was your mentor.
He was our mentor, and him and you are reasons that we're here today still, and just being open with that information and That's telling you what to do, and don't do it my way. Don't. My father said that you used to meet him at the bottom of the hill every one day a week, and you had already walked the crop, and you would take him around and show him what you found and say, Dave, listen to me, do it my way. But Dale, without that, how would we have survived? I mean, honestly, I know that you don't want to admit to it, but you're the reason we're here today. You and Danny and a lot of blocks in our foundation, Vince Fiorini, and there's a lot of guys like that, and we're just so thankful for you and what you've done.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, the industry here has been very good to me. As I said, it was Mike Faldino and Ross Dunsmore were on the committee that hired me, and I got support from everybody here. I mean, I couldn't ask anything. If I had a need, somebody would try to step up and help me out to do something.
I think that
it was
Oswego County has always been very special in that way. I think till this day we're not. I don't view my fellow farmers as competitors, even though we're in the same market, selling the same guy, trying to do our sell our produce. We're not competitors. We're friends first, and then we're gonna help anybody. Like this fall, if we didn't have the community that we have, we would have had a lot of onions left behind because we had a bumper crop and we didn't have boxes to put them in, and guys lent us their boxes. Oswego County's been very tight, and we go to we have our twilight meetings, and we always have a good time.
That's for sure.
What do they call it at Cornell? It's called we call it the twilight meeting, but it's called the booze and sausage party. Dale, thanks again.
You're entirely welcome.
All right. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.